Aliens wanted Earth's surrender. Humanity gave them annihilation instead. HFY Story. Prologue. The Ultimatum. The stars had always been silent, a glittering canvas that humanity once viewed with wonder and possibility. That silence was broken when the Veluthar arrived. The Veluthar Dominion, a warlike empire of obsidian-clad conquerors, was a name whispered in terror across the galaxy. They were not builders, they were not allies. They were a wave of annihilation that swept through star systems like a shadow, leaving entire civilizations shattered. The Galactic Federation had tried to resist them for decades, but war after war had ended with surrender. When the Veluthar fleet arrived at Earth, they did not waste time. A single ship, monstrous, its spires of black metal seeming to absorb light, descended over the skies of New York City. From it, a booming message echoed across every broadcast frequency, translated into 100 languages and ringing in every ear. Surrender your world and submit to the Veluthar Dominion. Resist and your species will be eradicated. You have 72 hours to comply. The ultimatum was not unexpected. Humanity had been watching the stars, seeing system after system fall to the Dominion. But Earth had long been underestimated, first by nature, then by their own wars. Now the Veluthar made the same mistake. Inside the war room deep beneath Luna Base, President Mara Keen addressed her assembled council of generals and admirals. Holo-projections of the Veluthar fleet loomed above the table, rows upon rows of warships that dwarfed Earth's combined forces. "They expect us to kneel," Keen said, her voice carrying across the room. "But Earth doesn't kneel. Not now, not ever." General Elias Thorne, his grizzled face lined with decades of war, looked around the table. "Then we show them what happens when you threaten humanity." On the big screen, the village of Kaser shrank. The people crowding the balcony faded from view. The decision was unanimous. Earth's response was simple. Come and try. Chapter 1. Fire in the Heavens. The Veluthar invasion force emerged from hyperspace 2 days later, an unrelenting storm of warships that eclipsed Earth's skies. Their flagship, the Dreadspire, led the charge, a vessel the size of a small moon. Beneath its shadow, smaller cruisers and destroyers broke formation, ready to descend on the planet below. In orbit, Earth's defense stations braced for impact. Satellites armed with kinetic railguns and missile batteries lit up the dark, their weapons firing salvos of tungsten rods and guided warheads. Explosions rippled through the void as human ingenuity met alien arrogance. "It confirmed on their lead destroyer," shouted Lieutenant Imani aboard Luna Base's control station. The feed displayed a Veluthar cruiser splitting apart, flames consuming its jagged hull. But for every ship destroyed, more pushed forward. Plasma lances rained down from orbit, slicing through satellites and defense platforms. Earth's skies became a graveyard of debris. From the command deck of the Resolute Dawn, Earth's flagship, Captain Anya Carver issued orders with ice-cold calm. "All ships form up, hold the line, no matter the cost." The Resolute Dawn surged into the fray, its railguns firing hyper-velocity slugs that punched clean through Veluthar shields. Around it, Earth's fleet of frigates and destroyers wove through the chaos, their smaller, faster hulls outmaneuvering the lumbering Veluthar warships. "Enemy forces closing," reported Lieutenant Krieger. 3 cruisers on approach, Vector 819, right to Protective Operation Warden. "Target their lead ship," Carver replied. "Launch all torpedoes." The Resolute Dawn unleashed a volley of fusion torpedoes, streaking like comets toward the enemy. 2 of the Veluthar cruisers managed to activate their shields, absorbing the brunt of the explosion, but the third wasn't so lucky. Its hull buckled, the explosion tearing it in half. The crew erupted in cheers, but Carver's expression remained grim. "They're testing us," she murmured. "They're not even trying yet." After exercise, the woman would put on, "Beneath Earth's skies, the first Veluthar landers broke through the defenses, descending like meteors into the heart of the planet's major cities." The ground war had begun. Chapter 2. The Fall of Cities. In New York City, the invasion began with fire. Veluthar drop pods slammed into skyscrapers, their impact sending shockwaves through the streets. From within, their infantry emerged, towering creatures encased in obsidian armor, their faces hidden behind masks of glowing red glass, energy weapons carved through human defenders with terrifying precision. Captain Rafael Torres, a veteran of Earth's Special Forces, led a battalion of soldiers through the burning streets. "Hold this intersection," he roared, his voice carrying over the chaos. His soldiers crouched behind barricades of rubble, firing railgun rifles that punched through Veluthar armor. "Sir, they're flanking us," called Private Lang as Veluthar infantry advanced from an alleyway. Ross turned. It wasn't a flank.
"Frag grenades now!" Torres ordered. His team hurled a volley of explosives into the alley, the resulting blasts sending alien bodies flying.
The fighting was relentless. Blotar warwalkers, massive machines with spindly legs and energy cannons, stalked through the ruins, blasting apart buildings and reducing entire city blocks to rubble. From a rooftop, Torres spotted one of the walkers advancing on a civilian shelter. His heart tightened in his chest. "Bring in the anti-tank team." Within seconds, a squad of soldiers fired a shoulder-mount rail launcher, the projectile streaking across the sky before slamming into the walker's leg. The machine collapsed with a screech, its massive form crushing the pavement below. But the victory was short-lived. Torres turned to see fresh waves of Veluthar infantry advancing, their weapons glowing with charged plasma. "Fall back!" he shouted, even as a blast knocked him to the ground. The battle for Earth had only begun, and already the cost was staggering. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 3. Humanity's Resolve. President Keane watched the war unfold from Luna Base, her face pale as casualty reports streamed in. Cities were falling: London, Tokyo, Johannesburg, each reduced to smoldering ruins. Ana Bocaro, one Keane station, had been razed with a blue light. "General Thorne," she said, turning to the veteran commander beside her, "how much longer can we hold?" "Eh?" he asked, awake and looking around the muck. Thorne's face was lined with exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "We'll hold as long as it takes. Earth isn't beaten yet." Harper and Chuck continued to read. In secret, humanity had prepared for this day. Hidden beneath Earth's surface and in the depths of the outer colonies were weapons the Veluthar could never have anticipated. Railgun cannons the size of skyscrapers, orbital strikes powered by fusion reactors, and experimental stealth bombers designed to bypass enemy sensors. On the shattered surface, resistance forces waged guerrilla warfare against the invaders. Soldiers, civilians, and refugees alike took up arms, using every tool at their disposal to fight back. In the mountains of Colorado, Lieutenant Mei Chen led a group of resistance fighters in ambushing a Veluthar patrol. Her team planted charges along a canyon pass, detonating them just as the enemy convoy approached. The resulting explosion buried the alien forces in rubble, earning the team a hard-fought victory. From space, Captain Carver and the Resolute Dawn coordinated strikes against Veluthar landing zones, cutting off reinforcements and supplies. "We may be outnumbered," Carver told her crew, "but we're not outmatched." As the days wore on, Earth began to fight back, not just to survive, but to win. Chapter 4. The Turning Tide. The Veluthar invasion was relentless, but humanity refused to break. Across the globe, resistance forces, battered and bloodied, struck back with ferocity. Entire cities had been reduced to ruins, yet those ruins became fortresses where humanity dug in, turning rubble into barricades and streets into battlefields. In London, the once grand skyline was reduced to charred skeletons of its former self. The Veluthar had turned the Thames into a staging ground for their assault, deploying walkers and infantry through the heart of the city. Commander Mei Chen led her resistance unit from the underground tunnels that wove beneath the old streets. "Walkers are coming," whispered Corporal Reed as distant tremors shook the ground above them, two heavy ones heading for the shelter zones. Chen's face was smeared with dirt, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can't let them through. If they get to the shelters, it's over." From the tunnel's exit, the resistance fighters emerged, spreading like shadows across the broken streets. They moved with quiet precision, their exosuits camouflaged against the rubble. May signaled with her hand and her team split into position. "On my mark," she muttered. The walkers appeared massive, insect-like machines that loomed over the ruins, their energy cannons glowing ominously. Veluthar infantry marched beside them in perfect formation, their black armor glinting in the pale light. Now, a volley of explosives erupted from the ruins. Grenades and rockets streaked toward the walkers, striking their legs and joints with pinpoint accuracy. One walker buckled, its spindly limbs collapsing under its weight as it crashed into the earth with a metallic groan. The Veluthar infantry scattered, firing wildly into the ruins, but humanity was already moving. May led the charge, her rifle unleashing bursts of hypervelocity rounds that tore through Veluthar armor. Her team fought like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in the smoke, using their knowledge of the terrain to devastating effect. As the second walker turned its cannons toward the ambush site, May spotted a weak point near its core reactor. "Reed, launcher on the reactor now." Reed hoisted the shoulder-mount rail launcher, steadying his breath as he lined up the shot. With a deafening roar, the rail slug streaked forward, punching through the walker's armor and detonating the reactor in a blinding explosion. When the dust settled, the resistance fighters stood victorious. The Veluthar forces lay scattered, their mighty machines reduced to smoldering wreckage. May's team cheered, their cries echoing through the ruins. "We're not done yet," May said, breathing heavily. "The fight's just beginning." Chapter 5: Earth Strikes Back. While the resistance held the ground, the Terran Navy struck back in space. Humanity's forces, once thought crippled, had begun to rally. Hidden in the asteroid belts and the shadowed corners of the solar system, the remaining Terran fleet had been rebuilt into something deadly and precise. On board the Resolute Dawn, Captain Anya Carver stared at the tactical display. The Veluthar fleet still dominated Earth's orbit, but cracks were beginning to show. Humanity had spent decades developing experimental technologies in secret, and now they were ready to unleash them. "Status on the stealth bombers?" Carver asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Ready to deploy, Captain," replied Lieutenant Krieger. "Targets locked on their forward command ships." Carver nodded. "Launch." From hidden carriers, squadrons of experimental stealth bombers, sleek black ships that absorbed every form of detection, slipped silently through the chaos of the orbital battlefield. The Veluthar fleet, focused on overwhelming Earth's defenses, never saw them coming.
"Bombers have penetrated enemy formation," Krieger reported. "Command ships targeted." "Are command ships targeted?"
Carver watched as the tactical display lit up. The stealth bombers released their payloads, fusion warheads designed to bypass Veluthar shields. Explosions rippled through the enemy fleet as command ships erupted into fireballs, their black spires crumbling into debris. The loss of their command vessels sent the Veluthar formations into disarray. The Resolute Dawn and its accompanying ships seized the opportunity, advancing through the chaos and targeting the weakened cruisers. Railguns thundered, and missiles streaked through the void, cutting down the Veluthar fleet one ship at a time. Enemy forces are retreating, Krieger shouted, disbelief in his voice. All 4 fighters were fired up. Carver allowed herself a small smile. They came here thinking they could crush us. Now they're learning what happens when humanity fights back. Chapter 6. Retribution. The Veluthar were relentless, but humanity had turned the tide. From the ruins of Earth's cities, resistance fighters pushed the invaders back. On the orbital front, the Terran Navy drove the Veluthar fleet to the edges of the solar system.
Admiral Thorne stood in the command center of Lunar Base, watching as holographic projections showed the retreating Veluthar forces. "We're not letting them escape," he said. "Prepare the fleet. We're taking the fight to them."
The counteroffensive began with a single strike. Humanity's fleet, led by the resolute Dawn, chased the Veluthar remnants to the outer edges of the solar system, where the enemy attempted to regroup. The Terran Navy struck hard and fast, tearing through their defensive lines with brutal efficiency. On board the resolute Dawn, Carver issued her final orders. "Target their flagship. I want it gone." The Dreadspire, once the harbinger of humanity's destruction, was now a wounded beast. Its shields flickered, its weapons sputtering as human ships closed in. The resolute Dawn fired its main railgun, a final shot that pierced the Dreadspire's core. The flagship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, fragments of its hull scattering into the void. The Veluthar fleet, leaderless and broken, fell into full retreat. Humanity had won. Epilogue. A new legacy. Earth's skies were scarred, its cities shattered, but humanity stood victorious. Across the solar system, survivors emerged from bunkers to see the sun shining through the smoke. The Veluthar had come for surrender, but left with annihilation. In New York City, where the invasion began, a monument was erected amid the ruins. Its inscription read, "Conflicts fought here every day. All of these wounds must be clean. They demanded surrender. We gave them annihilation. Humanity endures." Across the galaxy, word of Earth's victory spread. Species that had once cowered before the Veluthar saw humanity as a beacon of resistance, a species that refused to kneel. The Galactic Federation, shaken by the events, sent emissaries to negotiate with Earth. But humanity had changed. They were no longer the underdogs of the galaxy. They were its defenders, its warriors, its storm. And the stars would never forget the day humanity fought back.